to Expanding Your Faith, a podcast that tackles modern-day issues with a focus on spirituality, with Bishop Greer Godsey, Reverend Mark Trim, Father Matt Schnabel, and Bishop Ben Williams. Thanks for listening. Take a breath, open your heart, and let's expand your faith together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Expanding Your Faith. I'm Bishop Greer, and joining me tonight is Padre Ricardo Romero. Hello, Padre Ricardo. How are you?
Very good. Hello from the West Coast. I'm coming to you from El Cajon, California, which is in the county of San Diego. I'm about 20 miles from the Mexican border at Tijuana and about 15 miles to the actual coastline of the Pacific Ocean. So it's a hot day, but that's good for if you want to be out in the ocean, but not so good if you happen to be in Washington, D.C., I don't think.
That's right. They had to close down the Trump 2050 anniversary celebration yesterday through the midday because it got so hot up there. I think they did today too. So it is definitely warm everywhere right now.
It is.
Tonight we're going to be talking about a project that our church has been working on for the last year. And what it is doing is called the Veritas Manifesto. And this project was born out of years of study and struggle and work by Padre Ricardo, Mr. Tony Herrera, and others, focused mostly on how we treat immigrants and migrants, but also expanded to other minorities who are being marginalized in our country today. And this project has kind of taken on a bit of a worldwide spread as members of the committee hail from various regions around the world to now help build and implement this project. And I'm going to give Padre Ricardo a chance to just kind of explain, first off, a little bit of the history of how we got here and kind of what the beginnings of the Veritas Manifesto were.
It's delightful to be here visiting with you, Bishop Greer. I might mention to our audience that Bishop Greer and I met when he was doing a internet radio show talking about what was happening in Maricopa County, Arizona, which I'm a lifelong resident of Phoenix, Arizona. My father was born in Phoenix, and my grandmother was living in Arizona when it was a territory. Mm-hmm. So definitely Arizona is the home roots of my patriarchal side of my family.
Right.
And so we had a sheriff, Joseph Arpaio, who became somewhat notorious for his tent city. He erected about 300 tents that he would house prisoners during the hot summer months in a way of punishing them. His philosophy was that cruelty would ensure that there would be a low recidivism rate because nobody wants to return to a cruel setting. And so if by having a cruel prison, you would be discouraging people that want to be repeat offenders. And so he got a lot of notoriety over this. And then in the early 2000s, Arizona became very much involved in voter politics, beginning to enact in the legislation strict voting rules of who could be allowed to vote in any election, city, county, or federal. So Arpaio signed on by being able to capture, as he would call in a sweep, those that were undocumented working in the city, and then they would be deported. And he began doing this in a big scale. I mean, weekends, he would have his entire patrols out there in various places in Phoenix, pulling people over and finding out whether they have documentation. I was born in Phoenix, and as I mentioned, my father was too, but I lost count of the times that I would be pulled over from my car, driving my car, and asked if I was a U.S. citizen and if I had papers. And 2 or 3 times I was actually detained until I could prove that I was an American citizen. And that used to outrage me because, my roots were strictly from Phoenix all the way around Arizona. But even I would get profiled by this. So I met Bishop Greer when he was doing this internet radio show, and he wanted to have more information about what was happening with Arpaio and these immigration sweeps that he was putting on in grandiose style. We're talking about a man who used to have a chain gang that he would put out there so the public could see this chain gang of women working on with the both guards, like just out of a 1970s movie or something like that, very much into optics and everything. And so Arizona was getting more and more involved in acting legislation that would actually viewed as anti-immigrant, and they finally did pass a law in 2010 about that. Anyway, along the way, I was involved in several activist groups that were protesting the sweeps. And it occurred to me that being a political activist isn't working. We would have, like the last rally that I helped organize, we had 40,000 people show up for that one. We were getting big crowds of people coming to our rallies and so forth, but really nothing was getting accomplished. Nothing was changing. It was just actually getting worse. And I finally came to the conclusion that fundamentally what's wrong here is the moral base that can support a cruel type of government that would enforce radical anti-immigration laws and profile people strictly because of where they're from. A form of systemic racism carried over from the 19th century even, and so what I saw was that we actually have a problem involving morality here. And it was at that point I decided to enter the seminary and study to become a priest, because I felt what we need is to be able to come back out and preach the true gospel, the actual gospel of the Sermon on the Mount, and away from all these other things that we've gotten involved in. So many false ideas, like one of the ones I used to hear all the time back then was that this country was founded on prayer. The founding fathers were all led by the Holy Spirit, and they all prayed when they cast their votes to make the Constitution. And that is straight out wrong, because they were deists. They weren't Christians, but the idea of a Christian nationalism, I saw back in the early 2000s beginning to form, and I saw it get stronger through the years. This Christian nationalism that we now have, that it somehow finds a way to sidestep the moral issue of what's happening in our country right now with the raids that are conducted by ICE, with people like, for instance, this last weekend, last Sunday, there was a nun in Texas walking to Mass in the morning, and ICE picked her up and detained her for a day until they died.
So I just wanted to point out real quick that our last episode of the podcast, we actually talked about how Christian nationalism is not Christianity.
That's right.
That was our podcast last time. So it kind of dovetails with this quite well.
And so the spot in the line where we're at right now, where Christian nationalism, and I follow several other denominations, not just our own independent Sacramento movement of the OCCI, but I look at other denominations. Methodist, for instance. I worked several years as a music director for at least 20 some years as a music director for Lutheran Churches of America. And so I look to see what's happening in the various denominations, and some of them have a direct, straight out offense against what's happening with the anti-immigration movement it's more under Stephen Miller, who is the consultant to President Carter about these immigration raids that the ICE is doing and so forth, to see how the other denominations are handling it and looking at it. And there are some Christian denominations, evangelicals generally, who support what's happening with the ICE raids. They have an understanding of it as they see it, as that we are a nation of law, and law must be upheld. And if people come here in opposition to the law, then they need to be dealt with. One of the things that I found, even going back to the early years, Bishop, was that most people didn't believe me when I told them that the legal issue of being in this country without documentation is about the same equivalent as a speeding ticket. You know, to actually bypass the complete system of representation, for instance, and being given rights, even if you're here without documentation, that still does not preclude you from being protected by the Bill of Rights. And so the fact is that Christian nationalism embraces this particular form of government is extraordinarily disturbing. And when this was all happening, a colleague, an activist from Phoenix, got in touch with me. I'm talking like sometime around 2020, somewhere in that range. He got in touch with me and said, let's put our experience working as activists and see if we can create an atmosphere of enlightenment so that people understand what's at stake, what's happening here, what's being taken away, what liberties are being taken away from people, and how the churches can become centers of refuge, for the people that are being, uprooted by this system. And that was the beginning of the Veritas Manifestus. Veritas being the Latin for light, enlightenment. And because we felt what's missing here is the enlightenment of not only what the problem is, but what's needed to support and help the problem become, not a problem, but become a solution, and how that involves everyone. And so we wrote this Veritas Manifestus, and I proposed it to Bishop Greer, as he said, just about a little over a year ago, and Bishop Greer and I had worked before when we were doing a similar project involving social activism. And so from that, we came up with an organizing committee that is a part of the newly organized and appointed formed office, the Office of Faith, Justice, and Humanitarian Efforts, that was created by Bishop Greer and the College of Bishops. And they appointed me to be the director of this newly formed office, which we have since organized an organizing committee. And that actually has taken, we have representation here in the United States. We also have, as a part of the group, coming from Vancouver, and then all the way over to Argentina in South America, and also Bishop Juan Carlos in Colombia. So we're covering quite a large geographical area. The pastor from Vancouver, his ministry is to Southeast Asia. So he's bringing on board all his contacts in Southeast Asia. And what we've adopted from, as a result of the Veritas Manifesto, what we've developed is an Operation Nazareth Manifest. And what is based on this manifest, what we call this operation that we're going to launch this month, it's rooted in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, verses 18 through 19. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And using that as our root of this operation that we're going to begin, which is going to be a series of webinars and other discussions and how to empower churches and congregations to be centers of refuge and information for those that are being disenfranchised by our government right now. And we set a date later this month as the launch date. So I've given everything kind of in a real thumbnail version of it, Bishop. If anyone has any questions or things, go ahead and bring those out here. We can talk about it a little bit more.
And so part of this manifesto is a large grassroots effort to try to get people to assist with various different areas of support for communities that are most marginalized.
Grassroots and faith-oriented, I would say.
Right. And some of those things are like simple things that you wouldn't think are necessary, but like just being able to get groceries to people.
Right.
Because there are people that are so afraid to leave their home because of what's going on in the United States and abroad, that they're afraid to leave their home long enough to go get groceries.
That's because the process is so arbitrary. Like for instance, the nun that was detained last Sunday, walking to church. Now, initially, when this massive movement was started with the president using ICE to enforce it, it was supposed to pick up the worst of the worst. We're going to make it safe for America. We're going to get rid of all of these felons that are here without documentation, those that have criminal records and all that. That's our primary target. Well, then how does that justify picking up a nun that's walking to church, walking to mass on Sunday morning to detain her? So the process is completely arbitrary. Anyone can be suddenly spotted and then taken, no questions asked, just taken. And you don't dare put up any resistance, because if you put any resistance, you could possibly even get killed. You could get brutally beaten if you give any kind of resistance towards it. It's really hard to, Bishop, because back in the days when I was living in Phoenix and I'd get pulled over by the sheriff deputies, they'd pull me over and ask, what's this all say? Where are you from? Where are you born from? Where are you? What do you do now? Where are you going? And they'd ask all these questions, and you ask them, am I being arrested? And they'd say, no, you're not, but you better answer these questions, And sometimes they take me out of the car and put me spread eagle in the back and search me. All of this because I was profiled that I could be a potential undocumented person, And so the system now is much worse. And as you mentioned, people are afraid to go out and get groceries or even to drive to work, or to be separated from their children. It's a due process of law.
And here, as we record this episode, this is July 4th, and we are celebrating the independence of our nation. And one of the founding principles of this nation was that we would be a nation of laws.
Right.
Whereas where they came from in that day and time in the United Kingdom, under King George had very much done away with laws in the sense that he made up the laws. Whatever he decided that day was what they would be governed by. And so he would make wild proclamations, and they would change on the spur of a moment, much like we see today in the United States. And so one of the founding principles of this nation was that we would adhere to laws. And another component of the Veritas Manifesto is working with lawmakers and legislators to try to come up with ways to protect the rule of law, to give people due process, and to maintain a certain semblance of freedom in the nation, even in the midst of a very authoritarian takeover.
Right. It's something to be about by, how do you say, standing up immigrant rights and all that somehow you are disabling the country from being a safe place because you're advocating an open border and all kinds of people that can all this type of thing, and crime rates are going to go up and all that. And frequently what I found is that most of these, what I would call myths, are just that. They're myths based upon ignorance of the law. For instance, we don't have an open border. We never really had an open border, although I remember back in the days when I was growing up, my cousins that lived by the border there in San Diego, we'd go back and forth all the time to Tijuana without, nobody saying a thing. People just went back and forth. And then when Ronald Reagan was governor of the state of California, they opened the border for farm workers to come across because they were trying to break the farm workers union. So you have all these people coming back and forth. But the idea that by having open borders, we're making the country unsafe. And the other thing is that statistics prove constantly that the crime rate amongst undocumented is significantly lower than the crime rate in the average American society. And it makes sense because if you're undocumented, and you can get deported at the drop of a hat. You're not going to go out there and try and steal or break into somebody's home or assault somebody. You know, I mean, that would go against all the reasons why in the first place. So that the myth that crime, is rampant, have these people, these immigrants that are coming here. What is really is this country has evolved in these 250 years uh, with how do you say, at least embracing, if not going along with, a systemic racist society. I mean, it took us all the way into the 19th century to outlaw uh, slavery. But even then, Jim Crow cropped up immediately after that, and you have all these lynchings happening and all that. And so, what the Veritas was trying to do is bring enlightenment, and part of that enlightenment is the enlightenment of the political system of government, as the government is not supposed to be a government of church and state being together, but a separate government that is a civil government and not ruled by a monarchy. And that's where the true celebration of July 4th should be at, is our declaration of liberty from the oppressed brought upon by the monarchy. And today, not only do we see it brought on by our current monarch, that we also have the corporate interest that virtually set the political agenda for this country as well. So we're wrestling against money as well as blue blood. But that was the basis of the Veritas. And then Nazareth Manifest is to actually go into action using the grassroots and interfaith groups working together to create churches that are based on mutual aid. And I like this little phrase, what we call.
Absolutely. We just finished a book study in the parish here this past Thursday on The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And, of course, Bonhoeffer uses some of those, the very same terms, radical hospitality, vicarious solidarity, and vicarious suffering. In fact, that was the final chapter of Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship. It's talking about this vicarious suffering, vicarious solidarity, in which he talks about how we as people of faith cannot advocate, we cannot work to help marginalized communities and marginalized people without being down there with them in their suffering, where they are. And we can't speak from a place of safety. We have to actually be with them in the midst of what they're going through. And so, to me, this project, the Veritas Manifesto and the Nazareth Manifest, encapsulates that idea of being down there in the trenches with the people who are dealing with these types of situations, these people who are suffering at the hands of unfair governments, unfair laws or regulations, and puts us in a spot that's very unsettling.
It's all of that, plus that we have people that are being marginalized because of health issues, being denied health care when they have need of medication and not being able to afford purchasing medication because of the price, not having health care insurance, for instance, and not being able to get treatment when it's needed, and the condition becomes worse. They become also oppressed by the same regime that is bringing on the oppression to the others of different races and beliefs and religious beliefs and so forth. I think a word also should be mentioned, Bishop Greer, about what happened to Bonhoeffer. What was his demise? And that being, he was executed just a few weeks before the surrender of Germany. And they executed him on purpose. They knew they were going to surrender, but they executed him anyway because they wanted to get rid of him so much. I mean, they felt the Nazi Party felt so threatened by Bonhoeffer, and he was accused of being a part of the plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Now, it's debated whether he actually was an agent of that conspiracy or not. He never defended himself and denying that he wasn't a part of it. He just accepted that was his fate, was to be, executed. That stands against Adolf Hitler. But, you know, he had, how do you say, this feeling that he had to be entrenched in the actual grassroots of what was happening in Germany. He was in the United States, going to a seminary there in New York, and there before the war began. And when the war was going to begin, he immediately made plans to return back to Germany. And his hosts here in America said, you can stay and plead political asylum, and you'll be granted asylum, and you won't have to go back to Germany and subsequently executed. And he said, how can I turn my back on my brothers? How can I justify that if I'm not a part? I'm there in spirit. Now I need to be there. He did back to Germany, and eventually was imprisoned by Adolf Hitler and subsequently executed. And there's one thing that he said that I have never forgotten about that book. He said, when things have become to the point where they're at right now in society, and he's talking about Germany with the Nazi society, you literally have to drive a spoke through the hub. You just have to just drive it right through there. There's no other way. You just have to just bring the abrupt to a stop. This is as far as it goes. And that requires a full-fledged commitment, to feel that way. But that was also the inspiration to put together the Veritas Nazareth Manifest, was the light of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his views about how we have to serve the community. And in this case, what we're looking at with the Nazareth Manifest, we're looking at areas of organizing where people can get health care, where people can get groceries, where people can get fuel for their cars to get to work, where people can get those that will be there for their children in the event they should be detained. Their children will not be uncared for, so they're making powers of attorney for children to be protected. All of this as a method of survival during this time, and implementing the churches to be that place, that first aid station, so to speak, working through the various denominations in the interfaith movement.
I think it's important to also point out that Bonhoeffer quite clearly to the seminary, Union Theological Seminary in New York.
Right.
He said, if I don't go back and stand with the people suffering in Germany, then I will have no moral authority to preach after the war is over. And I think so many Christians forget that today. They forget the fact that part of being a Christian is being willing to lay down your life for others. And it is so difficult for them today because their allegiance is split between, following Jesus and following their man-made Jesus, Donald Trump. And so it has come to a point in our nation where they are much more happy following Donald Trump as their Lord and Savior than following the actual Jesus of Nazareth. And so it is led to a lot of churches. In fact, a Roman Catholic priest right here in Georgia who actually called ICE on members of his congregation, had them come into the church to arrest them right here in Georgia, violating centuries of precedents that the church is a sanctuary, as well as opening up those people to abuse and detainment and harm, all in the effort of trying to follow a gospel that was not the gospel of Jesus, and certainly not the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church.
Right. Pope Leo has been very much on target with his commentaries being focused at J.D. Vance, the vice president, and also Donald Trump as president, about the immorality of the treatment of immigrants in this country. The thing that is so ironic about this is that the country benefits from the activities and involvement of immigration. I mean, immigrants, first of all, uh, people say they should not be, uh, how to say, accepted because they're getting a free ride. We're paying tax money for them to get all the things, that the government will throw at them. But the truth of the matter is that they pay the highest rate of taxes because they all work and have taxes, how do you say, taken out, but they never file for refunds. So there's a huge amount of money that comes in from just that alone. But they provide labor, they provide expertise in certain fields. Uh, they are a family environment, which is what this country supports or wants to support as a country of family values. That all is in that. What off-putting is the its system of immigration. Recently, somebody uh, came at me and said, "I'm all for immigration, but I'm against illegal immigration." And I asked that person, "Can you describe for me what is legal immigration?" If you were counseling me, I'm living in Italy and I want to immigrate to the United States, what would you tell me what I would have to do? And you know what? He didn't know what to start. He had no idea how you get started. The other thing, 2 years ago, under President Carter, the United States, along with many other multinations across the world, formed a policy dealing with refugee status. Those that are refugees that are coming seeking political asylum, for instance, seeking refuge from another country, what would be the rules involved in that? And the rules up to this administration used to be that all a person had to do was present themselves to a customs agent and claim, we would like to become considered for political asylum. And then they go into that process of, whether they're going to be granted asylum or not. So showing up here without papers in itself is not illegal. In fact, there really is no such thing as an illegal human being, you know, to begin with. So as Bishop points out, the Veritas Manifesto and the Veritas and the Nazareth Manifest are focusing on these key elements that are, how do you say, impeding our society because of current legislation or administration from the federal government. Now, Bishop, I'd like to come back sometime and give the 5 points in the Veritas where we stand up, the points, as you mentioned, getting political representation regarding legislation. But we also provide for, say, healthcare, and 3 other, so there's 5 separate areas that compose the Veritas Manifesto and what it is that we are trying to bring enlightenment toward. And then, sort of like the subject and the verb, that is the subject and the verb is the Nazareth man, as scriptures dictates, bringing liberation to the prisoners. Those are people that are being prisoners by, say, either political oppression or racism, or through healthcare, being, disenfranchised because of their healthcare problems, or unemployment, or what we call affordability. All those areas are covered in those 5 points. So if you want me to come back, I'll be happy to bring those points forward in a more, I would just say, organized fashion, which each one represents.
Right, and we can certainly do that. I do also want to point out that part of the reason that Jimmy Carter's administration put into place the refugee status program was because of all the backlash after World War II was over, because it was discovered a book that went viral after World War II was by a young teenager in Germany named Anne Franks. And so many Americans today have never read The Diary of Anne Franks, originally called The Little Girl in German. But The Diary of Anne Franks spoke about their treatment in Germany under Nazi regime. And it was discovered after the war was over that early in the war, Franks and his daughters and their mother boarded a ship to come to the United States, escaped Germany, and were turned away as refugees and sent back to Germany, where several years later,
over 3,000 children were turned away.
Right, and where they would then die years later, time in concentration camps. And so if the United States had had a refugee program, those children would have lived. They would not have died in Nazi Germany. And so the Carter administration was pressured into setting up a refugee program, mostly because it was during Carter's administration in the 70s, in which the Diary of Anne Frank really became popular in the United States and began being read in schools, and people began to really hear and understand what was going on. And so he felt a tremendous amount of pressure to make sure that that never happened again. And sadly,
another thing about Carter, excuse me, Mr. mentioned is that he looked at the situation of, say, the Japanese volunteered, falsely in this government for just being with the Japanese heritage, and so he made reprimands to that group as well.
That's right. Absolutely. And one of the most vocal activists about the Japanese internment camps is a man who played Sulu on Star Trek. And for the moment, his name has escaped me. George Takei.
Oh, yes, that's right. His family, right.
Who was a young boy when his family was interred in a version of a camp.
Right.
For Japanese and Japanese Americans. And so he even produced a film about what life was like in the internment camps in the United States.
So Carter brought this, the compassion towards Japanese that were interred falsely, as well as all those in the United States, as well. It was a multinational thing done by many European countries. United Kingdom, Germany, they all signed on board with the guidelines to how you deal with refugees seeking asylum status. That was in place all the way up until Jeff Sessions, as the acting attorney general for Donald Trump's first term, put that all in suspension completely. Absolutely.
And we have seen only a continued slide away from that under this current administration, as they work to not only take away the rights of people to due process, but they also attack the press, they attack the people protesting, as we've seen priests, bishops, clergy who have been attacked while they were protesting. So we have seen a lot of that going on here in the United States in this administration. It's not just immigrants that are being attacked. It's citizens in this country.
Right.
And we've even this week, the president make it clear that he would detain anyone who stood for democratic ideals and anyone who protested his actions. He said that in a speech. He would deport them so fast to make their heads spin.
It's the oppression is, I think, spread now, though, more across the board. For instance, I live in San Diego County and drive a diesel truck to pull my RV. And so about 2 weeks ago, I was paying close to $8 a gallon for diesel fuel, which means that my wife and I don't go out that much because, a trip 10 miles away, each direct 20 miles, I'll chew up 3 gallons of gas. That's like $25 worth of gas just to make a trip down to the Walmart to get a loaf of bread or something. That is another form of oppression that is striking across the country. Now people are finding it difficult to buy groceries, higher prices in produce, higher prices in other canned goods and other things that are no longer even available anymore. Try and go out and get a can of olives, So I think that the time period that Bonhoeffer was, being a bright light in dark Nazi Germany, we're seeing a resurrection of that bright light again, and it is the mission of the Office of Faith, Justice, and Humanitarian Efforts to carry out that mandate, that manifest that was given in Luke chapter 4 about liberating the prisoners, and that goes to those that are imprisoned by racism, those that are imprisoned by debt, those that are imprisoned by marginal health and lack of health care, all of that, and I believe the answer is within ourselves as we represent ourselves in the various faith groups that we support. In this case, the Office of Faith, Justice, and Humanitarian Efforts being designated and appointed by the Old Catholic Churches International, and Bishop Greer as the presiding bishop.
Well, I certainly think that you're doing a great job in this project, and it is an honor to be working with you to build this project, get it off the ground, and get it into the hands of the people to begin doing the work in the grassroots efforts. For those that would like to know more or to connect with you, see how they can help, how can they get a hold of you, Padre Ricardo?
Well, you can put my email address up on the screen if you wish. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me, is either, and I'm also on Facebook as well as Rick Romero. You can find me there as well. But if you want to put my email address up there, if you can list both the one for the OCCI and my own personal one at Gmail, that'd be fine with me. Otherwise, I'd be happy to recite it over the air if you think that would be helpful.
We'll put that in the comment section of the podcast so that people can certainly find a way to contact you. You can also visit ofjhe.myocci.org. That's Oscar Foxtrot Juliet Hotel Echo Mike Yankee Oscar Charlie Charlie. Mike Yankee Oscar Charlie Charlie Oscar Romeo Golf. More information, and there's also ways to contact Ricardo from there. Well,
that's really good. If you go to the OCCI website, to the page, the page of the office there, you'll be able to look at the blog,
right,
and see how our organizing committee is what we're discussing and what we're trying to develop within our committee. And Bishop, I too am very honored to work with you. I think we have an outstanding leadership committee, representing a very big geographical spread, therefore encompassing all of the nuances that are involved in dealing with the various markets that we're engaging in. And so it's good if you go to the website, the OCCI website, and read more about us and look at our blog. That would be really, really good.
Excellent. And as always, a faith community leader or parishioner in a faith community that you think might want to assist in this program, do let them know how to find us, because we are always looking for faith communities to begin this work within their community. This is really a grassroots organization, and the organizing committee kind of helps build ideas for how to implement these programs and processes. But without the grassroots efforts, it's kind of useless. So by all means, do check us out there. You can also follow us on Mastodon, and that is myocci at mastodon.myocci.social, where we also post information there. Padre Ricardo is on Mastodon as well. And we're also on Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok, and where else? Threads, Instagram. If there's a social media out there, we're on it.
and don't forget Convergent Streams.
Convergent Streams, yes. We run a magazine called Convergent Streams that can be found at convergentstreams.org. We're always authors to write, but also people to read and to pass that around. This edition is about to come out this coming week, by the middle of the week. But we'll begin seeking articles for the next edition very shortly. It's a magazine that's produced quarterly, and anybody can write for it. We always give a topic of interest, but we don't usually turn away any article that's got some sort of good information in it. So thank you for reminding me about that. Padre Ricardo. And thank you for joining us tonight, Padre Ricardo. I know you're a very busy man.
I'm retired. I'm retarded.
So he's out there in California soaking up the rays at, what is it, 75 years old?
Yes, 77 today was the high.
No, I mean your age.
Oh, my age. Oh, 75 years old now. I think I'm the oldest in the jurisdiction.
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Then you can make me the great patriarch.
Right. And so still fighting the good fight. So thank you for joining us here today to share about the project.
Good to be here.
And thank you to everyone listening and everyone who joined us on our studio audience. A reminder, you can always join us every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on younow.com/Bishop Greg or on TikTok at Expanding Your Faith. You can also find us at podcasts, that's podcast with an S at the end, .myocci.social, where you can listen to past episodes of the podcast. Until next week, when we once again attempt to expand your faith, keep shining bright, my friends.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Expanding Your Faith. If today's conversation encouraged you, share the episode. It helps more people find the show. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also find us online at pod.myocci.social and ourstfrancis.org. Follow us on Facebook at Expanding Your Faith. Our producer is Bishop Ben Williams. Expanding Your Faith is an outreach ministry of St. Francis Parish and Outreach in Augusta, Georgia, produced in cooperation with the Metropolitan Community Church of Our Redeemer in Augusta, Georgia. Until next time, keep expanding your faith.